that in 1984, I and others started writing the hundreds of pieces we would need for the GNU system. And by 1992, we had almost all the system. Some of the pieces we had written, some we had found. But in any case, we had almost a complete free operating system. However, one major essential component was missing. That was the kernel. The kernel of the system is the component that allocates the machine's resources to all the other programs that you run. We were working on a kernel in 1992, but that project just hasn't really worked well. However, in 92, Mr. Torvalds, who had written a kernel called Linux, released it as free software. Linux existed in 1991, but it was not free software then. Its license was too restrictive. It did not allow commercial distribution, which meant that certain users, namely businesses, could not have Freedom 2 or Freedom 3. And if the license of a program doesn't allow all users to have these freedoms, it's not free software. But in 92, Torvalds made Linux free software by releasing it under the GNU General Public License, which is the most widely used free software license. It's the one that I wrote for use in the programs that we wrote for the GNU system. But I set it up so that anybody else can easily use it too. So when Linux became free software, the combination of the almost complete GNU system and Linux was a complete free operating system. And for the first time, it was possible to buy a new PC and run it in freedom. So the liberation of Linux by releasing it under the GNU GPL was an important contribution to the free software community. But the people who put Linux together with all the pieces of the GNU system were focused so much on Linux that they thought of all the rest of the system as a small add-on. And they started calling the whole thing a Linux system. And other people imitated them. And that's how it happened that millions of people use this variant of the GNU system, and most of them don't know that it's basically the GNU system. They think it's Linux, and that it was all started by Mr. Torvalds in 1991. That's not fair to us, so please don't call the system Linux. If you use the system, please call it GNU/Linux or GNU plus Linux. Give us equal mention. We started it, so we certainly deserve at least that much. So if you use the system, please call yourself a GNU/Linux user. And when you're talking about the various versions of the system that are available to install, please call them GNU/Linux distributions. And when you're talking about a computer that's running this system, please call it a GNU/Linux box, and etc. But it's true that credit is not the most important ethical issue in life. And if it were just about credit, it would not be worth so much attention. But there's something much more important at stake in your choice of the name to call the system. And that is your freedom. Your freedom is at stake. Indirectly, of course, because directly the choice of names doesn't change anything. But indirectly, it influences people. If you call a rose an onion, it will still smell as sweet, but cooks will get confused. The words you choose determine the message you communicate to other people. And that message exercises influence over other people's thoughts which then determine their actions. So over time, you do influence others through your choice of words. Since 26 years ago, the name GNU has been associated with the ideas of freedom that I've told you today. The name Linux is associated with different ideas, with the ideas of Mr. Torvalds. And what are they? He doesn't value freedom. He doesn't think that software users deserve freedom. He doesn't even think he deserves freedom. He doesn't value it. He says that he's happy to use proprietary software as long as it's convenient. So what he's saying is, value convenience, not freedom. He has a right to his views. But it's not right that the tremendous job that we did for the sake of freedom be misattributed to him and then serve as his platform to oppose the views that motivated us to do the work. And it's dangerous for all of us, because when people think that he started the whole thing, they tend to admire him so much that they copy his views. They adopt his views, which means they don't value their own freedom. They don't learn to value freedom. And that means that when we have to fight to defend our freedom, they won't be with us. And because of that, we could lose. Our future depends above all on what we value. If we want to have freedom, we have to value freedom, and we have to act based on that value. Freedom is frequently threatened. To keep it, you have to defend it. You can see that through all of history, up through the way Bush damaged human rights all around the world. Now, in order to defend freedom, you have to value freedom. And in order to value freedom, you have to understand the concept. In most areas of life, which are not new, after all, most areas of life have been around for quite some time. And the debate about human rights in most areas of life has gone on for decades or centuries. Plenty of time to reach conclusions about what human rights people deserve and spread those conclusions around the world. Now, that doesn't assure we always succeed in defending human rights. In the past 10 years, we have lost a lot of battles. But at least it gives us a base to try. However, computing is a fairly new area of life. It's not even 20 years that most people in a few advanced countries have been using computers. And in other countries, it's even less time since most people began using computers. That's not much time to have a debate about what human rights you deserve in using a program. It's not much time, even if there had been a debate. But for the most part, there has been no debate. Almost everyone started using computers with proprietary software, surrounded by other users of proprietary software. Proprietary software was the only possibility they knew of. So they took for granted that software can be proprietary, that proprietary software is normal and legitimate and acceptable, which means that, in effect, they allowed the proprietary developers to dictate the answer to the question, what human rights do you deserve in using a program? And they dictated the answer, just about none at all, which is the answer that was most convenient for them, most profitable for them. And people mostly accepted this, except for us in the free software movement. We reject that position. We are trying to stop